Hi everyone, welcome to Serpente Sunday for Sunday, February 27th, 2022. I am Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and this week is going to be a day in the life of Macel, our children's python. Well, not really a day in his life. I'm just going to show you one of my sessions with him. And it's not specifically a training session. It's just one of those sessions when I'm going to clean his enclosure, and I use the cooperative care training that I've taught him in the past in order to ask him to come out of his enclosure. He spends some time on an exercise station while I'm cleaning his enclosure, and then I put him back. He seems to be popular. In fact, both of our children's pythons seem to be popular with viewers. So you're going to get to see Macel. He's doing fantastic. You're going to get to see what his enclosure looks like and some of the things that I have in there that are kind of unique to him. I'm also going to show you just a couple of short clips to remind you what choice-based handling looks like. And then I'm also going to show you a very short clip of an enclosure that I'm working on. It's a 4x2x2 black box cages enclosure for Ezra. And Ezra's been in past videos. He's one of our royal pythons. Ezra is in a small terrarium. He does come out and explore, but he just isn't quite ready to go from the terrarium to an enclosure. And so I'm putting his whole terrarium in his 4x2x2 enclosure, and I'm leaving the door open for him to come out when he chooses. And I just started setting that up tonight. So I'm going to show you what that looks like so far. But I literally just started a few hours ago, so it's a work in progress and it isn't finished yet. For those of you who haven't seen Macel before, he is an Antaresia childrenii. He's a children's python that was produced by Riley Jimison of Riley's Reptiles, and he was hatched in July of 2019. I'm using an activity station on wheels to put adjacent to his enclosure so that I can easily shift him out and then wheel him out of the way while I clean. And he didn't wait for me to cue him. Actually, he saw my activity and me wheeling the activity station up to his enclosure as a cue that he was going to be able to come out. And I didn't even have to ask him to target out of his enclosure. Many of the snakes, I use target training in order to cue the snakes to shift out of their primary habitat onto a station or into an activity area or a travel bin. But Macel actually just recognized that the station being adjacent to his enclosure meant that he could come out, and he likes to come out of his enclosure. I did do a target training session with him once he was partially out, just to get him the rest of the way out of his enclosure, and also because it's good practice for him. He's learning impulse control. As you could see, he lunges at the target, usually does that a few times before he actually settles into the behavior and focuses and concentrates. And then when I cue him that the behavior is over, he settles down and looks for the reinforcement, which he obviously readily takes. So now he's on the activity station, and that's convenient for me. I didn't have to reach into the enclosure and get him. I didn't have to force him out. He actually came out on his own voluntarily, and then I can just wheel the station out of the way while he's having an activity. I can now clean his enclosure. And he is in a focus cube habitats enclosure. It is 30 inches long, I think, by 15 inches high. And it's got windows on both ends, and then the plexiglass door that opens out in front. And then I've, of course, added my own enclosure furnishings inside. And it is getting totally cleaned out today. I spot clean a lot, but it's been a while since he's had a complete enclosure clean out. So that's what I'm doing. Now, this is something that's unique to him. It's a micro habitat that I place inside his enclosure. It's got the ability to be wet. So if he wants more humidity, if he needs to be wet, he's got cocoa husk and a water dish there, and I can let the water dish overflow into the cocoa husk, and that container keeps the water from getting into the rest of the enclosure. And his water dish is also one that he can get underneath. Now I'm cleaning the plexiglass with this cleaner that is specifically for cleaning acrylic, and it actually works pretty well. It works better than glass cleaner to clean plexiglass or acrylic doors, and I got that from Reptile Basics. Next, I just want to show you what his enclosure looks like. And there I am putting water in that little microhabitat tub that I have. Again, he can get under his water dish, and then I can let the water dish overflow into that cocoa husk. He's got a humid hide on the hot end of his enclosure with damp sphagnum moss in it. And then he's got a rock under his basking light. He's got a couple of other hides. That's a black box cages hide. He's got a ledge in back that he can stretch out on. That's his temperature and humidity gauge. He's got PVC perches. There's that microhabitat again. He's got a PVC perch in the corner and then one across the back. And then this is just a paper towel roll that I've attached to the top. It was on the floor, and so for this go around, I decided for something different. I would tie it to the top of his perch. And here I'm putting his little half coconut hide in there. He still likes to use that from time to time, so I can't forget to put that back, and miraculously, he still fits inside of it. So this is what his enclosure looks like. This is what Macel looks like using the activity stand. I actually thought that I lost him. I thought he disappeared. He blended into this vine that I've got tied onto the activity station. He's almost the exact same color and width. And so when I first went back to check on him, I thought that he had disappeared. But then I saw that he was just climbing around that vine. And he uses this entire activity station. Even though he's a very small snake, he is very bold, and he doesn't seem very fearful of anything. And here was my mistake. I should have quit while I was ahead and rolled the station over to his enclosure while he was on this level. But I was trying to let him have exercise, and he seemed interested in climbing to the top, which he does. Oh, here's his tail. He got attacked by cats last October and had to have the end of his tail amputated. Anyway, he climbs up here to the very top level. And that ended up being a little bit problematic for me when I go to put him back. As you'll see here, I'm ready to put him back, and I roll the activity station up to his enclosure, but he's no longer adjacent to it at the same level as his enclosure is. He's way up here on top, and so I decided I will target him down, and that only works partially. He follows the target only to a certain point, and then I end up picking him up and putting him away. Now, he is habituated to handling, so that wasn't distressing for him or anything. It didn't make him anxious. But I wanted him to practice his target training, and he has issues with impulse control, which I find is pretty common with children's pythons. Our other one is the same way. So I'm basically now repeatedly asking him to come down. I'm luring him with the target, and he's following it, and he's getting excited. And at a certain point, I decide to go ahead and reinforce him because I don't want him to become frustrated that he is orienting towards and following the target and not getting reinforced for that. So I decided that if he would just move his head around the corner of the basket, that I would cue him that the behavior was over. And I do that by flattening the target from vertical to horizontal. And then he settles. He understands that reinforcement's coming, and he calms down and he looks for the reinforcement. So once he takes the reinforcement, he's still got his tail solidly attached to the top, and he wasn't letting go, and his tail wasn't moving even during the targeting. And so that's when I knew that I needed to just quit while I was ahead. And I ended up just picking him up and putting him away. But as I said before, he's habituated to handling. I've had him a couple of years. It's not a big deal. So I put him away. I rolled the activity station out of the way, and he had burst his second food item open, and stuff the insides of the rodent were getting everywhere. It got on him, it got on part of his little microhabitat tub. So I had to do some cleaning while he was eating. But he's safe and sound back in his habitat, and he ended up getting a fuzzy mouse and a fuzzy rat during this training session. So 1 session, but 2 target training repetitions, and his enclosure got completely cleaned out. I want to remind everybody to clean targets and all other equipment in between animals, and obviously after the session. So Macel made a mess of everything when he burst that second rodent, and I had to clean everything really well, including part of him and part of his enclosure because he made a mess. Now I would just like to remind you what choice-based handling looks like. Choice-based handling means that you are giving the snake the choice as to whether or not they want to interact with you. And Pavlova is a great example. I see her being awake and active in her enclosure, and it's even before lights out. It's late afternoon. And so I open the door and I just give her the opportunity to come out if she wants to. I'm not targeting her, I'm not training her, I'm not doing anything. I just noticed that she was awake and alert, and I'm there and I'm in the area. I can watch her. So I open the door and I give her the opportunity to come out, not necessarily to interact with me physically, but just to come out if she wants to and interact with the environment as a whole. I also want to remind you that interacting with your snake doesn't always mean handling. There are lots of ways to interact with your snake. One of the ways I love to interact with my snakes is just give them the freedom to choose. Give them the opportunity to decide what they would like to do. And then I just like to watch their behavior. I just enjoy watching what they do when they have the freedom of choice to have agency over their own behavioral outcomes. And welfare science informs us that this optimizes welfare. The perception of control creates a more optimistic animal, whether it's a non-human animal or a human. This is Pfynix, and this is just another aspect of choice-based handling that I wanted to show you. She was in her cave and looking out her door, so I opened the door, and then she came out of her cave, and I had my feet propped up underneath her door, and she's coming towards me, and she's investigating me. And then this is TC coming out of his enclosure on his own, which he does quite frequently. And then we're going to jump over here to Ezra's enclosure and take a look at what I have going on here. This is literally just 2 or 3 hours after I started working on it. It's a 4x2x2 black box cages enclosure. He's got a sky hide. Actually, every python I have uses their sky hide. I have put Ezra's entire terrarium inside of this enclosure. I've already started mounting hooks for perches and nets. And I've got cypress mulch and cocoa husk in there. I like to put stuff around the water dish that's okay to get wet so I can let the water overflow. And this particular water dish also has a space underneath it that he can get underneath it and use as a hide. This side of his enclosure's got a shelf on it, and then it's going to have his heating and lighting elements, as well as this is the side I will put his human hide on. And then he has several other hides in here. It looks pretty bare right now because I still have to put foliage in there, greenery, more perching, more ledges. I need to order some Mag Naturals cave hides and ledges to put in the rest of the enclosure. And then it sits on top of a stack where Seric and Feather are. I think that this is going to work out really well for Ezra. I've said in previous videos that he's kind of an outlier in that he stays out all day long on the perches here or up in his rock cave or even lying on top of his rock cave. And then at night, which it's nighttime now, it's right before lights out, he gets down in the floor of his enclosure, and that's where he stays all night. This is just bonus footage of Radic, our Angolan python, for no other reason than he was out as I was filming. He was interested in what's going on. He's a beautiful snake, very outgoing, a really absolutely fantastic pet snake. Really, probably the best pet snake that we have if I was just looking for a pet. He's friendly, he's outgoing, he's visible all the time. Basically everything I've read about Angolan pythons in books or magazines or online is not at all what I observe in mine. He never hides except when he's in shed. He is hardly ever on the ground. He is always up high on his perches. He basks all day long. He comes down to the door at night and often once out. So there you go. Radek was hatched on June 20th, 2021, and he is from Terry Burwell Snakes. Everybody, thank you so much for watching and for joining me this week for another episode of Serpente Sunday. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you liked that bonus footage at the end of our Angolan python Radek. He is a really neat snake, and I actually need to do a whole video featuring him. I'll have to work on that. I have a long list of ongoing videos that are pending. But join us next week. Next Sunday is the first Sunday in March, and it is Super Dwarf Sunday. So next week's video will feature our Super Dwarf reticulated python Tau Seti from Reach Out Reptiles. Until then, everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.